Yeah, so my name's Hayden. I'm 21 years old right now, and I'm a junior in college at CU Denver in the CAM Recording Arts program. I'm super grateful to be here. But my journey started when I was just about 19 in San Francisco. Right before I graduated high school, I actually fell in love like insatiably with audio. It all started when I got a MacBook Pro for Christmas, and then it came with GarageBand, and then I was obviously just had a little keyboard hooked up to it. And then all of a sudden, I found myself in Logic. And then once I went out to college, I went into Ableton, produced my own stuff. And then once I really figured out that was exactly what I wanted to do, then I got into Pro Tools. And that was kind of when, at that same time, is when I started doing my internships. And so as I was insatiably passionate about all this audio and recording and mixing and mastering, all three phases, I started to look around for internships in Colorado. And so I found myself at the Keep Recording Studios in Denver, and that was the spring semester of my sophomore year. And then I shot back to Prairie Sun Recording Studios, which is a very large format recording studio in Wine Country, California. And so that's where we had 3 Neve consoles, 3 massive recording and mastering rooms. That was a really large format. We had like 9 interns on at once. It was crazy. So at Prairie Sun Studios, or at these larger format studios in California, the only times I ever saw another DAW, being used was when an external engineer came in and just rented out the studios in order to bring his clients in. And they would mostly be using Ableton or Logic because they'd be working on more of a modern digital kind of rap kind of thing, where they'd be messing with a lot of MIDI and doing a lot of live MIDI tracking, and just kept that really small format. So normally those sessions would look like an engineer in their control room with maybe 2 or 3 clients, 1 producer, 2 rappers, and they'd be constantly laying down beats and laying down rhythms, and then rappers would be going at it, and that would all be primarily in the box. So just a few weeks ago, we did a full kind of mimicking a pro industry standard drum session in like a large format environment. And so what we did was I led that in Studio H in 283, and so we had tons of students come in. It was super awesome. Totally full room, and I was showing just all these students how I would do it as if I was back in California in these large studio environments, showing them my personal ways of doing things the most efficient way I think I can. From cable wrapping to setting up a template in Pro Tools, to using hotkeys and making sure everything is done as efficiently and as fast as possible. And this included a lot of mic techniques, and a lot, being able to hear the flowing problems in cables, to having someone run back to the core and grab another cable, very small intricacies into bigger, to bigger things. The biggest takeaways, I talked to a few people after the sessions. I was like, so what was the biggest thing you learned? And they were like, we learned a lot, but the one thing I kept hearing was being able to fly in Pro Tools. Because I dedicated the last maybe 20 minutes of the session, to showing the fastest way to set up a template, to setting up a full template in Pro Tools without even clicking the mouse. But also, I had everyone come up to the board too, and they were able to see, exactly the lineup of the SSL channel strip from pre to EQ to Qs, to large fader to Pro Tools. But I think the biggest thing is that when you're in these control rooms, there's so many different ways to do one thing on the SSL. Maybe every engineer has their own way of doing it, coming from whatever background they come from. But the biggest thing was that I showed them the way that I execute a session. With all these infinite amount of tools around them, I'm sure it was really nice for them to actually be able to finitely, put something together. And now they can come back to the studios and be like, okay, this is how Hayden did it. He used a long fader to get into Pro Tools, and he monitored in Pro Tools. So he had his monitor mix going. That's just, it makes sense to them, so maybe they can do their own session like that now, instead of going into the SSL room and just being like, there's 1,000 ways I could do this, and I don't know what way to do it. So showing them a nice execution was really important. So in the future, I've always written songs. I've always been a songwriter, and I've always thought about, about eventually producing my own stuff. But primarily, I'm fully an engineer. Like I said before, I'm insatiably in love with audio and producing records and capturing a live performance or an isolated performance and mixing it and processing it and turning it into a huge piece of art. I also love teaching though, and I kind of figured that out when I did this workshop. And there were a few people I've worked with before that I've let assist in my session, and because I love having people around too. And just I found that I have an ability to be able to explain things to people that really locks in with them. I've definitely found that I have a huge passion for teaching as well. And so right now, I mean, my game plan is to finish my undergrad, get my master's either here or in Prague, and then teach here and teach abroad. And I mean, in whatever kind of environment I like to be in, whether it's a big or small format, whether they're passionate or not, I just love sharing my knowledge and my favorite ways to do things. Because there's no right or wrong in this field, I mean, fundamentally and theoretically there is, absolutely. But when it comes to making the record, if you want to throw a 58 into the wall while it's engaged with phantom power because it sounds good and you can afford that, then why not do it? And then going back to engineering too, I will always be making records, I think. And it's crazy at this time period of my life too, because it's hard to be so set onto something, and so passionate about something, and your parents are funding you, or they're not. I mean, I'm working as much as I possibly can right now, bringing in as much as I can to be able to do this kind of thing, and so it's scary as well. It's totally taking a risk, not knowing if you're going to change passions. But I ran into this issue like a year and a half ago. And now I know, there's no way I'm changing. I'm in love with this gig, and I love making records. I love recording, mixing, and I love mastering. And it's my deal.